I'm Paul Quinnell. I'm an instructional technologist here at Tarleton State University. What that means is they pay me to come in and train people in technology. So I'm expanding my role and coming in here and training people in technology. Okay, that's not going to be as impressive on my review as I thought. We're doing prompting today. If you guys want to follow along your own device, I encourage you to get onto the AI Builder site, which is located here. You could just log in with your Tarleton account and let's get started. Or not. There you go. You can touch it. Yeah, I think I was in the Zoom app instead of the PowerPoint app because I dared to touch the microphone. Uh, So when I run this workshop for various departments and groups, it's done as a interactive hands-on item. I encourage everyone to kind of be thinking of a work problem they want AI to do for them, but they haven't really come up with an item. I often encourage come up with something that's, think of drudgery. What do you not want to do? It's not like that. Don't let the AI take the fun stuff. We don't want the AI teaching the kids. We want the AI to be handling the administrative paperwork that you have to do on the back end of things. All right. So what we're covering today, we're going to go through a prompting framework. There are many of them. This is mine. It happens to be the one. It's just one I find is useful for teaching purposes. We're going to do a demonstration of the framework, and then normally we do a individual and pairing different exercises, and everyone in the room gets to work on their own individual prompt. What we'll probably do in this setting is kind of work on something a little bit more together. So this is the prompting framework that I like to teach. It has these 6 major elements: role, instruction, context, examples, constraints, and output. These are not all equal. Instruction, context, and constraints are the big items. In fact, you can use just those 3 in like 80% of these cases, and you're fine. Role and output are very powerful add-ons, and they're relatively simple to do. Examples and with the modern LLMs has kind of fallen off and is more of a troubleshooting item rather than a standard item. So let's go through these. So role is when we're telling the AI to take on a role or a persona. Now, no, I didn't say personality. The roles we want to give it are job titles, professions, general descriptors. You think of something where if someone told you they did X for a living at a dinner party, you would understand what that meant. So if you have a very hyper-specific title to Tarleton, that's probably not useful. You want to think of something that's more general, more documentation around that. And again, we don't want to use personalities. The reason that works, the databases for these systems are such that when you tell it to take on a role like of an accountant, it has a tendency to then focus a lot of its data pool attention over in the part of the database that involves accounting. And you suddenly get better accounting results than if you hadn't done that before. So it's a little bit of a hack to get it to start looking at the right place of its own data set relevant to what you're working on. Instruction is telling the AI what we need to do. That's essentially, any prompt is essentially that. For strong instruction, I recommend you start making a habit of doing it in a sentence and start with a verb. A lot of early prompting is can you, or something more passive like that. Just kind of give it an action verb, and in at least one sentence, this is what we're doing. Doesn't have to be everything in the world in that sentence, but it's just to go think about your teammate member comes in, you're giving them assignment. That first sentence just tells them, sets the tone. This is what we're going to be doing and working on. We do want to be specific, precise. We want to avoid any ambiguity because the AI does not deal with that well at all. We don't want to use words like cool or engaging or interesting or professional. What does cool mean? Everyone can tell me. Now, I want all of you to immediately agree to it without thinking. Yeah, that's the problem. So that's why we don't want to do that. Context, again, this is one of our big ones. This is your audience, the background, purpose, tone. Audience is pretty clear cut. If this is for you, tell it it's for you. If you're creating something for your class, tell it about the class. You know, who's in there? What are their demographics, their ages, their educational experience, that kind of information. Background is why you're doing this. If it's as simple as my boss made me, that's actually useful to the system. More often, there's a little bit more story to it. Well, my boss told me to do this because we had this problem, or there's this initiative going on at the university, and this is doing our part of it. That is all very useful context information for the AI, and it will adjust its output, and it'll be more toward what you're wanting to do because it'll have a better understanding. It's like how we all complain. We want to know what the big picture is so we can do better. AI has the exact same complaint. So if you don't give it to the AI, you can't complain to your boss. Tone is how do you want it to come across? Do you want it to, is it simple? Is it concise? Is it, that kind of the measure of the language output. Examples, as I said, don't worry about examples unless we're in a iteration troubleshooting step. So examples is when you give it one or two strong past cases of something you've done. So let's say we're doing a prompt with a specific output. It's going to be matching up a spreadsheet. And you've already done a couple of these spreadsheets. You can feed those two spreadsheets into the system and tell it, these are examples of previous output. I really like this, this, and this in the spreadsheets. I need you to replicate that. And that is very helpful for it to get that refinement. But it's no longer a primary necessity. It was about a year and a half ago. It no longer is. So try the other steps first. And if you keep having problems and you have examples available, this is a tool, but it's not something you have to immediately go for. Constraints, the last of the three big ones. These are your must-haves and your boundaries. So what absolutely has to be in the output? And what do you want it to not do? This is where you kind of come in and remove any bad habits it may have in general or with a specific prompt you're working on. Output is layout, organization, container. What we mean by container is like, well, is this going to be in a text file? Is it going to be in a Word file? Am I doing slides? That type of item. So we're not worrying about what the content is. We're just worried about kind of how it's structured and outlined. Do you want bullet points? Do you want paragraphs? That kind of thing. All right, so we're going to do a demonstration of one of these prompts in action. And actually, before I do that real quick, let me just show you guys the second page you guys have is a link to this resources guide over here on the right. This is just a preview of what's available. That link is functional for anyone in the Tarleton organization, so feel free to share it. It covers everything we're doing today. There's even a video of this presentation that is already loaded up there. It's got some expansion into some other areas. It's got a big list of task verbs for you and a digital copy of the main handout you guys have. If you need any help afterwards, my contact information is at the bottom here. And if anyone is interested in kind of trying to keep up with AI information and doesn't have the time, I've got a newsletter I run for Tarleton faculty and staff once a week that does that. In fact, if you get signed up by Friday, there's going to be a special edition on Friday covering Stanford University's AI Index Report, which is pretty much their summary of a lot of different surveys and studies and reports that have come out in the last year on various states of AI. Okay, so we're going to do some side-by-side prompting here. We're going to take a transcript of a Teams meeting that we did in IT, and we're going to summarize it. We do a weekly meeting for change controls where everyone gets together and goes, I'm planning to do this, and it lets someone else scream, no, don't do that, you'll break that. I join up in the meeting. Most of my team doesn't. And I would make very short, quick notes of what was going on in the meeting and share that with my team so they could just scan those notes and see if something's going to happen that might impact them. That's really all they were kind of interested in is something going on, in which case they could then focus in on that. Otherwise, they could just scan it and not worry about it. So we're going to do two instances with that, and I'm going to load the transcript file, which, as you expect, is just a several page document of people talking away. And then we're going to do the base prompt over here. We're not doing much. I'm just going to ask it to summarize this meeting transcript. We'll let it do its thing. Okay. So that is definitely a lot shorter than the document. It's got some key announcement sections. It nicely built everything into a little table for me. This is new, so Claude Sonnet 4.6 upgrade going on here. And it gives a bit of a bottom line. Okay, that's fine. I can go through this in about a minute or so, but it's not really as scannable as what I've done before with my team. So I'm going to be a lot pickier about how the output is, and so I'm going to need to give it that instruction. So we're going to pull that in, and this is the actual prompt I run here for everything. So we're going to get that copied in. Let's go through this real quick. So this is our role section, telling it it's a senior executive assistant with expertise in writing meeting minutes. Wouldn't that be handy to have at every single meeting we have on campus? Instruction, recap verb, the meeting transcript for me to share with my colleagues. That's what I'm doing in one sentence. And then I'm giving it some additional instructions. I'm telling it to read through everything before it starts doing any summarization. Otherwise, it tends to go top down on its setup, and giving it some additional there. Context is this is for my colleagues. They are IT professionals. This is a high level overview, just so they can see if anything's impacting them. Constraints, one, it's got to be concise and it's got to be easy to skim. Those two things do not always go together. You got to tell it. We're telling it to cover all the subjects. We're not skipping anything. It has names of who said what in the transcript. That doesn't matter. And I don't want it to include that information. And then finally, the output. I'm telling it a specific title to give me in bold. And I'm telling it how to structure the bullet point system that I want to use. This is based on what I was doing manually before I started using the AI. I mentioned that near the end of the meeting, there's going to be some general announcements. We're going to group those together as a bullet point. And then I tell it to include a final line, which includes a link to the change control site. So if anyone sees something on the notes that triggers them, they have the link they can click immediately to go get all the details on that. So we're going to run that. Here is our setup, and this very closely matches what I output. So I've got the title, we've got a date put in here, and each of these main lines was a topic point that got covered, and it's given a status and scheduling information on everything. So my guys can just read this. If they need to, they can scan this to see where it is in the status of something. And at the bottom, we'll have the general announcements, which were put in here, and then the link. I just copy paste this, throw it right into Teams. So what was a half-hour meeting plus 20 minutes of manual work, after I built this prompt, which took a few iterations and did take some time, I can now finish the meeting and run the transcript, and I'm done in about 30, 60 seconds to do the whole thing. And since it's a repeatable thing, for me, it was worth the time to put together that longer prompt. So that's an example of it. Yes.
Sharing the screen to the Zoom. Sorry, I just got a little Teams message that they weren't seeing anything.
Oh, I do not have send a request.
What's the difference between ChatGPT and Claude?
Two different companies, different model sets. For a lot of stuff, they basically do the same stuff. There is inherent differences into them. I've got a guide on our knowledge base that kind of goes into a little bit more deeper. Claude is better known for coding and more human-like writing. I tend to prefer it for a lot of writing work myself. It tends to be a little bit more professional in its tone and approach, a little bit more concise on items. ChatGPT also has some strengths in those areas, has some generalist qualities, but it tends to be a little sycophantic, more so than Claude. Any idea you have is the greatest idea ever. Kind of deal over there. And its approach, its personality can alter a lot depending on how you've kind of set it and interact with it. For some people, it's their best buddy kind of scenario. I don't use ChatGPT, I use Claude, but I would not ever put that out there as a flat statement. An advantage with the AI builders, you've access to both, plus the Gemini system. Gemini has its own perks. So I would kind of encourage you to play around with a bit of them and see what's going on. I started on ChatGPT, and then I moved to Gemini, and then I moved to Claude over the last year or so. And you just got to get into and play around with them. If you're working with Claude Sonnet is going to be the go-to model specifically you want to work on over there. So that's within the context of our system. Outside of AI Builder, Claude's been doing a lot more work in the enterprise range in terms of a desktop. So they have a desktop app. They have a coding terminal system for software developers. They've got a co-work system, which Microsoft is going to be bringing in to Copilot at some point in the future that lets Claude interact with your computer more. So like Claude on my computer can, when given instructions, can read files and sort and mess with files on the computer. It can access applications. It can read the screen. It can run the computer for me if I want it to. For those type of things. And ChatGPT's got a similar coding system, but they don't have a more agentic computer running system at the moment.
You should be good.
Okay. All right, let's do an exercise. Like I said, we got a smaller group here. What's something you guys are interested in doing with the AI that's been either seems a little advanced or you just haven't been able to kind of get things worked out?
Can I ask a question about your prompt?
Yeah.
Summary?
Yeah.
Can we go back to it?
Yeah.
There was a phrase that I'm not familiar with that I just wanted to dig into for a second. It was right after you were asking it to do hierarchical processing. There was another thing that you were asking to do.
Scan the entire content.
Cheap thought methodology.
Yeah.
What is that?
So it's a little bit of an older, this dates the prompt a little bit. So it's not something we necessarily need to prompt the modern AI, reasoning AIs for anymore. Chain of thought is giving an instruction to the AI to think things through step by step. When earlier versions like ChatGPT 3.5, 4 didn't really have reasoning capability, so it didn't have the ability to think about what you're doing, develop a plan, work on the execution of the plan, evaluate what it's done, make adjustments as needed, then give the output. They were a little bit more of a jump right to the answer. So think of you ask a question of a 20-year-old student versus a 40-year-old professor. And what their minds are probably going to run through. So the chain of thought is going to be more of on the more seasoned individual with more who's been trained how to think. We take a lot of these things kind of for granted because it's just how we've developed our brains to function. And we kind of need to force these machines to do something similar because we think it's great because we do it. So we want them doing the same. So that's what that is. I wouldn't use that. It's not as powerful of a phrase these days on the current LLMs as it used to be.
Can't hurt though, right? I would think.
I wouldn't throw it. I wouldn't throw at it regularly. It can actually hurt. So if you've already got a system that's going to run through that kind of process normally, and then you tell it to do it forcibly, I have run into instances where it will start the first thinking process and then do a chain of thought on that thinking process before it gets to the next step, and you get a recursion, and everything slows down tremendously. So if you do use it and it's taking minutes for anything to pop up, you've actually probably run into something like that, and you may want to pull it off. I have had that. I had an older prompt, and then we got a new reasoning model, and we tried it on that, and went, the output was so much better, but the time it was like 10 times longer. And went, this is terrible. And it turns out because I shouldn't have, what was a best practice literally stopped being a best practice in the next update. I don't like teaching best practices. That's a big reason why, because it's going to change when the next model comes out. We just got new Sonnet and new ChatGPT. The ChatGPT update was nice, but nothing major. The Sonnet update, 4.5, 4.6, doesn't sound like much. It's freaking massive. And yeah, best practices don't live. They don't last 6 months. So I want you guys more of what I'm giving you here are classic items that are going to remain for quite a while throughout the different evolutions of the systems. If anything, prompting is going to be easier because it will deal with less specific information better each time we get an iteration of the main model. So at some point, we won't be doing this. Prompting engineering is not the next 20-year coding position. In fact, no one hires prompting engineers anymore. There was like a 18-month window where that was a job. And it's not, because we're seeing it's not going to be necessary in the future. All right. Any thoughts on anything we may want to work on from a prompting standpoint? How many folks do we have on the Zoom? Do we want to go back through the beginning bit? We could do that.
Our Zoom is just being broadcasted to a room in Fort Worth. I'm not sure. Shannon, is there anybody in the room in Fort Worth?
Not on prompting, but another just kind of general question.
Yeah.
Is there a methodology for setting up your prompting and the follow-ups if you're not typing, if you're speaking into it?
There's not. It's pretty much the same thing. The It's still natural language. You're spending a bit more tokens because you're probably not as concise verbally as you are written, but that's not really something I want you guys to worry about on any of the setup. It's we're in human to human. Here's how I think about it. In human human reactions, there are certain interactions that you prefer to do written communication. Let's take, because I'm covering my butt, out of the equation. There's still some cases where this is going to be better presented in written form. The reader will understand it better. We'll have, we're going to collaborate on this in a written format because that works better in our instance. And there's going to be other cases like I need to sit down, have a conversation, explain this, or we need to do our little powwow or our quick brainstorming session, and we're just going to throw stuff out and see what sticks and not worry about capturing everything. And that's going to be a little more verbal. So some of those baseline reasons you might write something versus say something can apply over here because of just the nature of the communication of it. People who use verbal systems with the AI, they're usually not doing finished work on the output. They are organizing their day. They are working on notes. They're searching and learning about something. Those type of scenarios tend to come in. So if you need to build a PowerPoint presentation and you're using AI for it, verbal is fine at the outset. Hey, I need to do a presentation on this. What are some things to cover? What are some ideas for slides? What are some ideas for graphics? And that's fine. But when you sit down to do the actual command to output out the slide notes or something like that, you're either going to stop and think about what you're going to say, or you're going to type. And essentially, it's going to be similar output like that. That makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Mine was driven mainly from I have about a 45-minute commute.
Yeah.
And I am doing a research question or learning or digging into something. I'm not trying to build a PowerPoint necessarily.
Yeah.
But there is that thought that I've had of, okay, can I structure the prompting of the questions in a different format? And then how to make it forget things when it's wrong. No, that's not what I meant. And just a more efficient way of engaging when I'm having to do it with push the button and say things.
Right. Are you having it develop things for you to use later, or are you using it to do research and give you the information?
It's more giving me the information.
Okay.
It's more.
So verbal's fine, and that's the type of scenario where let's talk about iteration. That's a big item with prompting. So I show you this big fancy, what we call a one-shot prompt. And again, for something I'm doing here, that's great. And again, I didn't get the prompt perfect the very first time. We iterate and make some changes on it. This is more for when you're doing larger work. For something like that, you want that conversation format. This is something that it's not very intuitive when you're getting new into the AI system, is that we're used to telling the computer to do something, we get the output. Photoshop, clean up this photo, boom, it's clean. We're not used to having saying, okay, you missed this, we got that, you need to do that over here. But that's where the system really starts to come in and shine. And so something where you're doing a research like that is a lot more of a back and forth conversation. So I'll ask it, what the heck I'll see something weird on the highway, and I'll ask Gemini what's up with that.
I think one of the last ones, we were passing the Amazon warehouse outside of town, and like 2 Amazon vans and then like a dozen Ryder vans. And I went, why the heck can't Amazon afford their own vans? I'm paying them enough money. And it got into basically said contractors. I went, well, what's up with the contractor? And there was a conversation. So it was like sitting in a room with a subject matter expert. You're not going to get everything they have in your first question, and you may find something you want to dig into and go back through, kind of deal. I haven't read any big research about verbal versus written in terms of quality of output. It tends to be what people want to do for work. There are individuals who prefer verbal just for constant work's sake. There are some AI tools out there designed for that type of thing where you just hit a button on the computer anytime and you just start talking and it's doing its thing. I prefer to type. That's just a personal thing. Yeah, so that's where we're on that. Iteration and conversation are big though, and you kind of figure out what's going on. I have a lot of conversations that are extremely messy, and then we get to what we want at the bottom. If that's something you're going to want to do repeatedly, when you get to the bottom, you tell it, okay, take everything we've gone through and take that the final output is what we want, and then build me a prompt to do that one time on the next time. And you can feed it the RICECO framework if you want. You literally say, use this prompting framework and just copy and paste my framework. And it will output a prompt. And so when you start a new conversation a week later, it'll do the same thing at the quality you wanted in the single time. So you guys always, when you're working with my custom models and other stuff, you're always seeing my final output. I didn't just prompt and get it done and go to lunch. Just like any other work that we're doing here. So.
That was my experience. Well, Gemini is the one that I'm using in the car most of the time too. And they're messy conversations.
Yeah. If you want to do something that's a little bit more podcasty, I don't know if you've worked with LM Notebook LM. That's it. So it's a Google product. It's available for free. If you've got a Gemini Pro plan, it carries over and you get pro features over into it. It's been a fantastic tool for feeding it documentation. So research papers, studies, ebooks, whatever you want to kind of do. And it can take multiple items from different sources, and then you interact with it and it grounds everything it's doing within that source context. And you can select what sources to turn on and off as you're doing your different questions. It's got a podcast feature, an audio feature. It's called audio, and it will do different audio layouts. And one of the popular ones is called the deep dive. And you create a new notebook, put in the references you want. And if you're not sure if you want to find references, you can ask Notebook LM to find sources on the topic. And it will go out, find the sources, populate them for you. Then you go to audio, do a deep dive, and there's a prompt, and you can just give it clarifications of what you want it to cover, what to focus on, that kind of information. And it'll process for a bit. And it'll pop out, it's usually roughly about 20 minutes, depends on contents, audio file. It's a M4A file or something, so it can easily transfer onto your iPhone or Android or whatnot. And it's a two-host conversational podcast based on the content that you fed it. So you just made a personal podcast for you on the specific item, but it runs auditorily. It's not it's not someone reading a research report. They're talking about this, and the system ties in how things tie into other things, and it does those kind of natural transitions, and sometimes very forced, unnatural transitions, because it's AI, it's not perfect. But that might be something you want to look at too. You'll need to prep it a little bit ahead of time, but you could probably prep out a week's worth of driving podcasts in an hour over the weekend, and do something like that. So I've actually started using that on my newsletter. So I've started putting an audio version of it. And so I have a 2-minute brief that just kind of blows through the headlines real quick if someone just wants the audio versus read. And then I have a deep dive version that it goes through all the news items, and it takes it I have it go with a lens for the university. So we're going through the news items and then pointing out the items that are impactful for academia, that are impactful for the workplace conditions our students are graduating out to, that kind of thing. And so it draws more of a, there's this story, it's interesting, but there's extra relevancies here you may want to be aware of as a faculty member or something like that. Going on there. All right. So we're kind of just running questions at the moment. This is main items covering prompting here. Let me pull this up for new folks and for the Zoom. The Zoom missed it earlier. Makes the effort picking the right one and the wrong button. So on the handout you guys have for the new folks who joined us, this is the prompting framework that I use as the basis for this this normal workshop. There's lots of prompting frameworks. This isn't the best. It's not the worst. It's one that I like and that I think teaches and translates well. The main items for you guys to focus on, the top 3 are instruction, context, and constraints. Most of the time you can get away with those 3 things and you're good to go. Instruction is us telling the AI what we want to do, starting off with a verb. Ideally do a verb in a single sentence. That's just, what are we doing here today? And then you can add additional instruction behind that. Context is going to be, you want to tell the AI about your audience. If it's not for you, who's it for? If it's for students, what grade level, what experience level, what major are they in? That kind of information there. Constraints are where we tell the AI it has to include these items in the output, and that it shouldn't include these other items in the output there. And then role and output are add-on items that are very strong, fairly easy to do. Role is when we're telling the AI to take on a persona, usually a job persona. So you give it take on the role of a university faculty, member in the math department or something along those lines. It's a little hack in that when the AI pulls from its data set, when it's given a role like that, it biases itself in the data set relevant to the role. So if I tell it to do a faculty math instructor, it's going to focus in on higher education and mathematics. And since I give it that role, theoretically, my output is related to those items, I'm probably going to get a better result and a better data pull from a result of that. And it's an easy 1-sentence add-on. Output is where we're telling it how to structure our report. Do you want paragraphs? Do you want bullet points? Do you want it in prose? Are you going to be putting this into an Excel spreadsheet? Do you want slide outlines, that kind of information for how it does items? Examples are kind of a little bit more defunct. They're no longer a standard. Modern LLMs have moved beyond the need for them. It's useful as a troubleshooting tool. So if you're trying to get it to do a job you've done before, and it's just not quite getting the output right, you can feed it copies of, here's where I've done it before, and tell it, these are the aspects of what I'm feeding you that I really like and I want you to replicate. And it helps it to figure out, oh, that's exactly how they want the framing of the columns. And, oh, I missed that it's in this font instead of the other font, that kind of item. But it's more of you've run your prompt once or twice and you're not quite getting there. And if you have something handy, you can feed it an example, but it's not really a mandatory item there. So, do you have any questions? You guys were coming in with anything along with AI prompting? Oh, okay.
So it's not about AI prompting, but my best friend really wanted to come to this, but she's at a conference in Boston, so she's texted me things to ask. She wants to know what you think about Anora and if you've used that.
I have not. I'm not familiar with it off the top of my head.
Okay, she said it's like an academic flavored LLM model.
Okay.
Like, anyway, maybe we'll come see you about it.
Okay.
Your office hours.
We can. I'll ask a different LM about it, or hopefully this can be for something. So your friend works here.
Yeah, Andrew is the.
Okay, send her the resource link,
Okay.
and I'll give her everything we're covering here today too.
Okay.
She'll probably appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, there's hundreds, probably even thousands of different LLMs at this point. We tend to focus on what we call the frontier models, which are the big boys, ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude. Part of that is because that's what we have access to. There is a subset of open source LLMs. So Llama from Meta is kind of the big name in that, but Amazon has some. Google just recently released Gemma 4 as an open source model. Those tend to be 6 to 12 months behind the frontiers in terms of functionality and capabilities. But the advantage with them is it's possible to just download it and install it onto a local device. So like Google's got a couple of apps that have come out recently on iPhone. One records your speech and it cuts out all of the ums, and the pauses and stuff, and then gives you very pristine text out of what you've spoken. And there's another one that runs a local Gemma model on your phone. The advantage of these is everything I'm doing stays on the phone. I'm not interacting with the cloud system. Nothing hits the internet. But there's restrictions in terms of its set point. The full Gemma one that's local, you can have a full conversation, but when you leave, the conversation doesn't get saved as a downside. So you can't maintain a big listing of items. Of course, everything in AI Builder has data protections that we don't enjoy as consumers. So I don't want you guys to feel like we have to have open source to have good data privacy. You can use AI Builder for stuff, but if you're looking for something personal, and then yeah, there's people who something like Aurora, it may very well be even based on one of the frontier models, and they just retune it for academia, so it has a bend over in that area. If it's not something, it's getting really expensive to build your own these days in terms of the training, and especially if you want to try to have any hope of keeping up with the other systems.
On output, have you noticed, is there a correlation between which ones play better with what other platforms? In other words, does Copilot play better with Microsoft and Gemini play better with Google Docs? It's when you're going to try to.
There's usually gets into training. And so like Gemini has absolutely been trained on Google Workspace. Of course it was. And it's also got integrations built into it because it's Google and they get to do that. So for us, our main integration system is Microsoft Copilot because we're Microsoft campus officially. And so Copilot is integrated into Word and Excel and PowerPoint, and it's everyone's got some access to that. Initially, it was just you hit the Copilot button, and it's just a chat window built into the side. It's getting a little bit more agentic as we roll through. So, like if you go to Word on the web and access Copilot, it'll come up and have some capability to interact with the Word document. So now I'm giving instructions to the AI, and it can come in and do some stuff over on the document over on the side panel there. So you have that natural integration of those systems because it's all the same house. ChatGPT has to partner up with anyone, and they don't have anything big in terms of productivity. So they came out with their own web browsers are a big one. So agentic web browsers were a big item. They were real strong and coming out last year, and they all took the three major guys all took very different approaches. So Google just put it into Chrome because duh. And so you can load Chrome, and I think you have to go into the settings to set it, but once you enable it, Chrome can come up with an Ask Gemini button. You click that sidebar. It can be just a side chat, but it can read what's on your screen. And you can go, so you can hit a website and go, what's going on here? Summarize this, that kind of deal. And they've moved it now where they're moving toward where it can do more active work in the web browser for its setup. ChatGPT went with making their own web browser, which was called Atlas. And so they had to build it from the ground up. But the advantage of that is they immediately came out as what we call agentic. And you open the sidebar, there's ChatGPT. You could load it up, and I could. One of the first things I did is like find me a hotel in downtown Houston for these dates. It's got to have these items. I'm looking at this budget range. And I told it to use Kayak, and it went to Kayak, and it just went through listings on Kayak off on the second screen while I was doing other work. It was actively web browsing. So from Kayak's point of view, it was a human clicking on everything. It was slow. It was way slower than what I would have done, but I got to go do other things for 20 minutes. And then I got a listing of it outputted the hotel listings. And it wasn't just searching a database. It was looking at the website. So I knew the information was a little bit more accurate. And then Claude from Anthropic, they built a Chrome extension. So you run that and you have access to Anthropic. But what they opted to do with it is to optionally take over Chrome. So I can go into my Claude app, tell it to do this thing, and search these items on the web page, and it will take over my Chrome. It asks permissions as it goes through everything, take over my Chrome tab and do kind of the same thing and run the tab. As a test, I did this, and no one from HR is in here, right? Okay. Train track, because those are very important. I can't understand how important it is to read every single element of that, but Claude can take your train tracks for you. I just kind of set it aside. So I did it on the data. There's a data. Ironically, it's on data security, but I'm a 20-year professional. Honestly, I'm a 20-year professional. It's like there's nothing there that hasn't already been rammed into me over that entire time. And it would click through all the stuff, quizzes hit, answer the quizzes, and run through. And it flagged me because after what we did the pretest, and it ran through the pretest, and it flagged me that something came up after a pretest. There was a new section it wanted me to run through, so it wasn't on the pretest. So I had to run through that real quick. The new section was on AI ethics.
Oops.
But yeah, I mean, so yeah, when you think about like Canvas quizzes, that kind of thing, if you don't have it in a strict lockdown browser setup, we can now do this on Google Chrome. Any of our Google Chrome browsers on campus can just run through a non-secured online quiz, or train track or anything kind of like that. We can use Lockdown Browser to get around that particular issue, but there's other tools available for not that much money that get around those. There's a tool, it was from a couple kids who got kicked out of Harvard. You're going to understand why they got kicked out in a second. They built a AI tool that shows up as a HUD on their computer screen. It watches everything, it listens to everything, so it knows what's going on, and in real time, it's constantly sending feedback and suggestions and that kind of thing based on what's going on with the work, if you're in a meeting, and information that's coming up. The system is set to hide from other systems looking for similar items. So if you run Lockdown Browser, and Lockdown Browser wants to see your screen, it doesn't see the HUD. But the HUD's still there. It sees Lockdown Browser, and I can be recorded during the test taking, and I don't have to say anything or cue anything. I just tell the system, hey, I'm taking a test ahead of time, and it will see the questions and start giving me information relevant to the questions and the answers. And unless you're literally over my shoulder, you could be monitoring this remote system and you don't know I'm running this. So they did that to kind of demonstrate that the whole testing center was stupid at in this day and age.
In class, like how can you give a test anymore if there's always a way to get around the lockdown? Of not knowing that they can get around lockdown.
Yeah, we're just testing the dumber kids.
For the next couple of years.
Teach online. I mean, because everything can't be essay. You know, we have some people who teach like extraordinarily large online classes.
So I've got a spiel on this. I don't have, this is one of those things that throws a lot more questions than answers. The short version, and I'm staff, you're faculty, so I'm not trying to step in on anything. How you guys run assessment completely has to be overhauled. Like not even close. You have two forms of classical assessment that I can't get around AI. Blue book and oral exam. Both are in person. Nothing I can do for you online. If I have the will, and the good news is the average student right now doesn't have the knowledge and capabilities that I've got. But yeah, I could cheat my way through pretty much any online class that you guys have if it's just remote.
There's a report recently that I don't remember which platform it was that just took the bar exam and passed.
Yeah.
It barely passed.
Yeah.
But it did it in 6 minutes.
So they're smart enough to do that now. They're getting close to passing medical exams.
Passed the bar exam.
There's AI models that are hitting gold medal in math Olympiads. So they're the output. And so in a world of that, maybe we don't assess people on the things we always assess them on. So we do. Let's look at written exams. They are where are we gonna I don't want to run over to the next guy. I think Rick.
Oh, I'll keep you on track.
Okay. There's benefits with written exam in terms of developing their cognitive foundation and skills, and those are absolutely imperative. So in a world where all the workplaces are going to AI, AI is the number 5 most demanded skill by the HR professionals. The number 1 is critical thinking, and the number 2 is problem solving, and that's across domains and job types. So you guys want to teach, what you guys are teaching are still the things we need to teach. When we're using tools that AI can replicate, but you're having them do that to develop those skills, the simplest thing may be, maybe it's too simple. Simplest thing may be just to be transparent with the students. I'm having you do this assignment. Yes, AI can do this for you in 5 minutes. That's not the point. The point is we're building these foundational skills that you're going to need for the rest of your life. And this is scientifically good ways to do that. So we want you to run through these exercises in the way we're asking you to do it for your development. I think math teachers have a lot I think older math instructors who've gone through a couple of shifts in their dynamic can have some information on this. So when calculators and graphing calculators and stuff came out, you still want to teach them basic arithmetic because you need to have a foundational understanding of how that works. But we stopped memorizing multiplication tables because you don't need that information in your head. You have a device that will handle that all the time. You need to know how to multiply. You don't need to be fluent in it or be able to necessarily knock it out at any given time because you've got something for there. But you need it enough so that if you use the device and something goes awry, you can go, that doesn't look right. It's just enough to stop and question what's going on. So I think some element like that's going to kind of come into play. If we're writing essays to develop the writing skills, well, yeah, it's good to have an understanding of what good writing looks like.
But not everyone needs to be fluent as a good writer because they're going to have a tool that does that. And maybe we want them focused on other things. I think that's what's going to end up being the shift. One of the radical ideas is you stop teaching in the classroom and you stop doing homework. You start doing assessment level work in the classroom, and an AI tutor preps them ahead of time at home. So they get initial learning and prepping before class. They come into class, review. If you need to do assessment, you do that there because it's in that controlled environment. This does not help online classes. Online classes is going to be more of a, I don't know. I don't think ABCDFs survive this transition. So,
Thank you.
sorry.
Especially the part about like the writing, I told the students in my research lab, I'm going to prohibit you from using generative AI when you're doing any writing for the lab. When you go on in your professional, you can do that if you want to, but my goal right now is to make sure that you understand how to do that.
Yeah.
And I want you to learn how to do that and then use that as a tool later. And it's been a source of like discussion, because there's stylistic differences. But I don't know why. It just makes me so tremendously sad that we would move away from people learning that organically, because I think it changes the way that you think and the way that you read a lot. And I think it's very developmental for the brain. I'm concerned about shortcutting learning processes and what that might do to neural networks. Not computer neural networks, but the ones like inside our head.
If you want to research on that, dig into what happened when we transitioned from cursive handwriting to
I've seen that.
text.
Yeah.
Because there were changes,
Yeah.
but no one's got, we don't, society, if you want society to progress, if you're interested in the survival of the species, we've got to get off this rock. Okay, we need colonies, we need something. I'm not saying the next 100 years, but just we need to do something. We need to keep progressing and moving ahead. Premature options are progress until we blow up or just wait until the sun blows up. We can't make it to space if we're all writing in cursive. We can't make it to space if we're not using AI.
We can do both.
Well, I mean, like I said, there's one or two conditions. We make it or, not so much. We figured out other stuff. The printing press was going to be one of the worst things that ever happened to humanity as far as anyone who could read back in the day. Because, all these sleeves are just what are they going to do with Dante? That's just ridiculous. We have an entire institution based on the fact that everyone learned how to read and, by age 5.
Yeah.
So it's scary in the moment. We went way off topic, but that's fine. I'm always happy to answer the questions we have here. Anyone wants to reach out to me? Contact information here. This is something I am working on. I do multiple of these AI training sessions. If you're interested in doing something with your faculty, your staff, your department, whatnot, reach out to me. I'm happy to work with you guys, get something done. Or if you just want to have a discussion that everyone walks away feeling really badly about afterwards, I'm open to that too.